had a bad attitude toward him, but then when I saw him wanting to have a lawsuit and get his privileges, I was really pretty furious. But then that was bad enough. But then, you do the shoe thing, but then it was too much the second time with the shoes, coming back to Atlanta. And I really did not have goodwill toward the man. And frankly, I found myself loathing the fellow and so resentful. And so the only thing I could do is I realized I've got to do something about this. You know what I had to do? I had to choose to pray for the guy, to pray for the guy's salvation. It's hard to hate somebody while you're praying for him. Perhaps you've noticed that. And I let loose of that and said, that's in God's hands. And so I don't like the guy, but I can love him. What does that mean? I don't have to care for the guy emotionally, but I can remember, is a love of the will, which chooses the highest good of the object loved. And that's what Job had to do. He had to love his friends, his counselors, who were really being very increasingly abusive in his life. And he had to let loose of any of that resentment and love them. And love is to choose the highest good for the one beloved. And that is to say, it is the love of choice, where you choose the highest good, even though you do not feel like doing it, even though you don't like the person necessarily. Thank God the scriptures don't say like one another, even as I have liked you. We'd all be in real trouble, I tell you. You see, that's something you can't mandate, because like is more of an emotion. You cannot command a person to have a particular emotion, but you can command a person to make a choice. We have the power to make choices in this life, and that's the great dignity that God has given to us. The power to make choices that really make a difference in our lives, have real consequences. And that's why I say in any friendship or in any marriage, one of the keys to that relationship is to choose to do the deeds of love even when the feelings are not present. That is one of the greatest things that one can learn in marriage and in friendship, is you choose to do the deeds even when the feelings aren't present. Because then you don't get into the shallowness of saying, I don't love you anymore. No, the love of agape is the love that will sustain any friendship or any marriage, that love of the will. And thus, Job prayed for his friends and chose the way of asking for their greater good. So just as that alleviated the poison in me, because that is a poison, hatred is a poison, so it also, I think, put Job in a position where God could then restore him. Now, I want to suggest here that what we saw here, when Job got this restoration, in fact, double of everything except for he had the same number of children. He got those children back, I think partly there, because those children still are alive. That is to say, he would see them again. So he doubles everything in terms of his property and his livestock and so forth, and restores all this to Job at the end of this adversity. And what I think we have here is not that there is a guarantee that we're going to have that restoration in this life, but rather I think that the book is giving us a hint of what we will each have in heaven. That reuniting, that restoration there that we will enjoy. I think we're going to look forward to a time when our perspective will be balanced, and when we, for the first time, will see face to face rather than through a glass darkly. And that's going to be an important thing for us to remember. The best you're going to see is just through this shadowy, dark glass. You're not going to see well. You're going to see it, and as we learn the Scriptures and deepen our faith and trust and hope and love, we have greater illumination, but still we are in the shadowlands, and we're not going to see much in comparison to what we will see when we see Jesus face to face. But we continue to press on. And what I think we have here is we look for a time, and the book of Job invites us to see that no adversity can defeat the purposes of the living God. No human or diabolical act can defeat God's plan for your life. This is critical. And we look forward to the time then when our troubles are going to seem as nothing in comparison to what the Lord has prepared for us. Romans 8:18 is a verse I often reflect upon along these lines. When Paul says, anyone know the verse? It's a very important one for us to remember, to think about. Paul says, I consider the sufferings of this present time, what does it go on to say? Not worthy to be compared with the glory to be revealed to us. That's an incredibly important insight. Paul went through an awful lot of adversity. In fact, I want you to look at his life just for a moment along these lines as yet another biblical illustration of what it means for a person to cling to the character of God in the midst of turmoil and adversity. I find it very significant that Paul's experiences of victory in the midst of unchanging circumstances, that is to say, he went through the thing and he wasn't delivered out of it. I think it's very significant. He uses that as proof of his real ministry for the Lord. Look with me to 1 Corinthians chapter 4. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 9 through 14, there's a veritable litany of things that they have gone through as servants of Christ. And he speaks about the fact that God has exhibited us apostles, last of all, as men condemned to death because we have become a spectacle to the world, both to angels and to men. We are a spectacle, and angels are looking on. We're fools for Christ's sake, but you are prudent in Christ. We are weak, but you are strong. You are distinguished, but we are without honor. To this present hour we are both hungry and thirsty and are poorly clothed. We are roughly treated and are homeless. And we toil, working with our own hands. When we are reviled, we bless. When we are persecuted, we endure. When we are slandered, we try to conciliate. We have become as the scum of the world, the dregs of all things, even until now. And so he is speaking about this. And then in 2 Corinthians 11, he does something very, very similar. He reviews a number of specific circumstances that he has gone through for the sake of the gospel. And in 2 Corinthians 11, verses 22 and following, he speaks about this idea of being one in far more labors, particularly in verse 23, far more imprisonments, beaten times without number, often in danger of death. 5 times I received from the Jews 39 lashes. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I have spent in the deep. I have been on frequent journeys, in dangers from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my countrymen, dangers from the Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers on the sea, dangers among false brethren. I have been in labor and hardship, through many sleepless nights, hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. Apart from such external things, there is the daily pressure on me of concern for all the churches. That's quite a list of things that he's gone through. You know, when I compare my life to that, things are pretty easy. You know, if I look at that, life's good. And I recognize that. But there's no assurance that life will be that easy. Look around this world. More persecution going on in this world today of people who are followers of Jesus than the world has ever seen before. Considerably more. And there is no assurance that we will go through. There are people around this world today who have gone through the same kinds of things, and indeed perhaps more, to the point of death. And this is a significant thing. I never forget when I saw Hotel Rwanda, for example, with my wife. And when we walked out of that theater, I had just a simple sentence to say. My response to that was very simple. I said, Karen, we don't have any problems. You see, relative to that, the worst thing that happens to us is as nothing. The idea of being hacked to death by a machete is not a likelihood in my life in this world, in this day. And the fact is that recognizing that is, I think, an important perspective of gratitude and recognition that there is no guarantee of deliverance. We ought to be grateful for what we have so that in tough times we thank God for His goodness and that He will deliver us ultimately to Himself. And in times of ease and of abundance, we should be thankful as well. The learning of thanksgiving in times of ease is just as important as in times of difficulty, and both of those are critical. I think, Ben, you had a comment.
Yeah. Well, since one of the ways we are relieved of being so concerned about what's happening to us is to pray